Welcome back to the channel for my Week 4 NFL recap. We're going to start with the Thursday night football game, the Detroit Lions versus the Green Bay Packers, where David Montgomery got 32 carries, had 121 yards on those carries, which actually is only under 4 a carry, but had 3 touchdowns on those carries. Jared Goff had a really bad early pick. The Lions' defensive line in this one had 5 sacks and were really good on run D. The Packers only had 27 total rush yards, which is huge in this game. And the Lions, on the other hand, had 211 total rush yards. Jordan Love had 2 interceptions and 1 touchdown, kind of a rough game for him, and Detroit took this one 34-20. The Cincinnati Bengals squared off against the Tennessee Titans, and Derrick Henry had one of his classic vintage games, 22 rushes, 122 yards, and a touchdown. Cincinnati scored a field goal on their first drive, but never scored again in this game after that. T. Higgins left this game with a rib injury, and Derrick Henry had a pass touchdown. He jumped over, flicked it, really actually kind of a tough pass for a touchdown. The Cincinnati offensive line, again, looks really lackluster, and with Joe Burrow hurt and unable to move in the pocket, he went down a good bit. Tennessee D-line is very underrated. Jeffrey Simmons, Tier Tart, Arden Key, and Denico Autry. Really like this D-line. I think it's very slept on. The Titans won this one handily, 27-3 against the Bengals. The Bengals are now 1-3. Really big question marks for this team going into next week. The Steelers played the Houston Texans, and C.J. Stroud kept up his great performances with a masterclass. 306 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Through 4 games, he has 0 picks. And Nico Collins had 7 catches, 168 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Great game for him. It seems like whatever wide receiver one plays the Steelers, they always do well. Just happens. Kenny Pickett left the game third quarter, didn't have a good game up until then, but left with a bone bruise. Looked like it was worse, but only ended up being a bone bruise. He should be back this week. The Steelers' play calling and offensive line continues to disappoint, along with Kenny Pickett. Levi Wallace and Patrick Peterson had really bad games again, and they refused to put Joey Porter in to get actual playing time. Really rough. And the Texans winning this one moved to 2-2 with a great win. Huge statement win, 30-6 at home in a stadium that Pittsburgh kind of packed out. Houston packed out the Steelers, 30-6. Big win for Houston. The Atlanta Falcons took on the Jacksonville Jaguars, and Desmond Ridder had 2 picks again, 1 fumble, 3 turnovers total. Really rough game for Ridder. It looks like they're going to be looking for another option next year in the draft. Bijan Robinson looked great, though. 14 carries, 105 yards. They really hit on that pick. Christian Kirk, 8 receptions, 84 yards. A lot of it in the first half, but another good game by him. And Darius Williams for the Jags had a pick 6. The Jags end up taking this one in London, and they will be staying there this week to play again in London against the Bills this coming week. What everyone thought was game of the week was Miami versus Buffalo, and Buffalo really showed up for this one. Josh Allen, crazy game, 320 yards, 4 touchdowns, no picks. Devin Achane, the running back for the Dolphins, the rookie out of Texas A&M, 8 carries, 101 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Super efficient game. He's been crazy in these last 2 weeks. The leading receiver for Miami was Tyreek Hill with 58 yards. Really down day compared to usual. Stephon Diggs had 6 catches, 120 yards, and 3 touchdowns in this one, including one he spun out of on the sideline and really just made a big play out of it. The Bills' defensive line looked great, and the Dolphins' offensive line looked really rough this game. The Bills' defense is really stepping up lately. Kader Kohou, the corner for the Dolphins, got burned by Diggs all game. Really rough play out of the corners for Miami. And the Bills' offense is so good when Josh Allen is calculated and on. They won this one 48-20. The Denver Broncos took on the Chicago Bears in a game that was pretty one-sided early on, but ended up being a huge comeback. Justin Fields had a huge bounce-back game, 28 of 35, 335 yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 pick. DJ Moore, 8 receptions, 131 yards, and a touchdown. Cole Kmet, the tight end for the Bears, had 2 touchdowns. Justin Fields, though, late-game fumble, and they ended up losing this one. They were up 21 points, and they lost this game to the Broncos. 31-28, the Broncos won this to move the Bears to 0-4. The Ravens took on Cleveland without Deshaun Watson, so Dorian Thompson-Robinson, the 5th-round rookie out of UCLA, started this one for the Browns. He had 3 picks, no touchdowns, kind of set the tone of this game. Mark Andrews for the Ravens, tight end, had 2 touchdowns. Lamar Jackson had 4 total, 2 passing, 2 rushing. Cleveland offense couldn't get anything going without Deshaun Watson and Nick Chubb now for the year. Baltimore D-line had 10 tackles for loss, and the Cleveland O-line really struggled. They've kind of had a down year compared to the last couple of years. Not much of a contest in this one. Baltimore handily took this one in Cleveland, 28-3. The Rams took on the Colts in a game that ended up going to overtime. Great game here. Matthew Stafford looks really good this year. Ball placement on, arm on, 319 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. Puka Nacua, historical start, continues. 9 catches, 163 yards, 1 touchdown, and the touchdown was for the win in overtime as the Rams took this one. Anthony Richardson only completed 11 passes, 200 yards, 3 touchdowns on those passes, or total, actually, 3 touchdowns total. Overtime walk-off by Puka Nacua to win this one. The Rams won 29-23 over the Colts. The Buccaneers faced off in New Orleans against the Saints in a divisional rivalry. We all know the Mike Evans versus Marshawn Lattimore rivalry. Derek Carr is playing clearly through a bad injury, 127 total yards, 0 touchdowns. A big sign of this injury was Alvin Kamara having 13 catches, ton of checkdowns, only 33 yards in his first game back. Chris Godwin, 8 receptions, 114 yards. Baker again impressing, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick. Jameis Winston came in for 1 drive and threw a pick, just chucked it up like we're used to seeing out of Jameis. Tampa Bay won this one pretty handily, 26-9 in New Orleans. The Washington Commanders took on the Philadelphia Eagles, and the Commanders, if you remember last year, were the team to break the Eagles' undefeated streak, so we knew this one could be close. A.J. Brown versus Emmanuel Forbes. Emmanuel Forbes is a rookie out of Mississippi State. He got burnt all day. This was his welcome to the NFL. 9 catches, 175 yards, 2 touchdowns for A.J. Brown, most of it on Emmanuel Forbes. Sam Howell was pretty impressive against a really stout defensive line, knowing that Washington has a pretty bad O-line. 290 yards, 1 touchdown, no picks. It's a really solid day for Sam Howell. Hurts had over 350 total yards. Sam Howell to Dotson as time expired to go to OT. Huge clutch throw by Howell. Dotson, great catch, sent this one to overtime. And Washington, put up another fight, but Philadelphia ended up coming out on top 34-31 in Philly. Washington continues to be a problem for the Eagles, but the Eagles won this one. The Vikings and the Panthers squared off with 2 teams without a win, and Kirk Cousins ended up with a 99-yard pick six pretty early by Sam Franklin Jr., really rough from Kirk. But safety Harrison Smith of the Vikings had 3 sacks in this game. Also beat Ike Ekwonu on the edge. Was a crazy rep. Justin Jefferson, 6 catches, 85 yards, 2 touchdowns, very crucial touchdowns. Alexander Mattison, 17 carries, 95 yards. Good day for him. Bryce Young, 25 of 32. That looks nice, but only 204 yards, no touchdowns, no picks, just not much contribution there. Good completion percentage, but not many yards off those completions. The Vikings held on to this one 21-13 in the game. Wasn't too exciting other than the 99-yard pick six, but the Vikings got a huge win, and the Panthers are just still struggling to get anything going. They really need a receiver. The Chargers and the Raiders was a pretty lopsided game for most of it. Jimmy G was out in this game, and Aiden O'Connell, the rookie quarterback out of Purdue, was in at quarterback for the Raiders. He went 24 of 39 for 238 yards, no touchdowns, and 1 interception. The interception was a really bad interception in the red zone. Justin Herbert had 12 rush attempts, which I thought was really funny. He's not that big of a runner, so 12 rush attempts is a lot. Josh Jacobs was the leading receiver in this whole game. 8 catches, 81 yards, so not much receiving going on in this game. Quentin Johnston continues to be a non-factor. They picked him in the first round, so having him contribute nothing is a big surprise, especially with Mike Williams out. Khalil Mack had 6 sacks. This is the highlight of the game. 6 sacks, 1 off the record in a single game, 2 forced fumbles, and 9 total pressures. Was absolutely insane in this game. A historical performance. And the Chargers ended up holding on to this one 24-17 in Las Vegas. The Patriots took on the Cowboys, and this ended up being Bill Belichick's worst loss ever, 35 points. Worst ever. Crazy to think about. Mac Jones got sat late due to the deficit, not because of the poor play, we think, but he did have 2 really, really bad picks. One was a pick six, both by De'Aaron Bland of the Dallas Cowboys. New England had 53 total rushing yards, not good. And Dak Prescott was solid, 28 of 34, 261 yards, 1 touchdown, no picks. Jake Ferguson, the tight end for the Cowboys, was the leading receiver in the game with 77 yards. So this was kind of a controlled game by the Cowboys, methodical by Dak. 38-3 was the final score of this game. The Cardinals took on the 49ers, And Christian McCaffrey, again, 3 touchdowns, 177 total yards. He does it every week. He is sensational. Brock Purdy, 20 of 21, only one incompletion, all game. Brandon Ayuk with another stellar performance, 6 receptions, 148 yards. On the other side, rookie wide receiver out of Stanford, Michael Wilson, had 2 touchdowns, and I really liked him. He was a big Senior Bowl guy. He really showed out there. Only 2 sacks in this whole game, very surprising with the 49ers' stout defensive front against a really weak Arizona Cardinals offensive line, but the 49ers take this one at home 35-16. On Sunday Night Football, the Chiefs squared off in New York against the Jets, and Zach Wilson had a redemption game. 28 of 39, 245 yards, 2 touchdowns, 0 picks. Looked far better than usual. Mahomes had 2 picks, both really, really bad picks, kind of like lofts that just didn't make it to where they needed to go. Isaiah Pacheco had a nice night, 20 carries, 115 yards, and a touchdown, which is a 48-yard run touchdown. He's a funny-looking runner, but he really balled out. The leading receiver in this game was Allen Lazard, who had 61 yards. Zach Wilson fumbled at the end of the game, ended up being, a reason that they lost this game. They only lost by 3, though, 23-20 to the Chiefs, and Zach Wilson really had a huge bounce back. Really cool to see. Monday night was really a beatdown. The Seahawks took on the Giants in New York, and Seattle had 11 sacks. 11 sacks. Devin Witherspoon was responsible for 2 of those sacks and a pick 6 on the goal line. Really bad pass by Daniel Jones. Noah Fant had a huge splash play, 51 yards. He was their leading receiver with 63 yards total in this game. Bad blowout. Geno Smith left with an injury but came back in. And Brian Daboll was throwing tablets on the sideline. Really rough scene. Daniel Jones played bad. The scheme was rough. No running game because Saquon's out. Really struggling here for the Giants. They ended up losing this one 24-3 to the Seahawks. Thank you guys for tuning in to my Week 4 recap. I will be back next week for Week 5.